The day it happened felt like one of those surreal moments you only hear about in gossip or catch a blurry clip of online, when a broke, hungry man shuffled into a corner grocery store and walked out humiliated, only to return 24 hours later with enough power to change the lives of everyone inside. What occurred that afternoon seemed ordinary at first, until it wasn't, and when the truth finally cracked through the surface, nothing in that neighborhood would ever be the same again. It was around 2:30 p.m. on a slow, gray Wednesday when a man walked into Gerber's grocery on Southgate and 9th. He didn't look like someone who belonged there, not because of his skin or his clothes or his age, but because of the way people looked at him. The second he stepped past the motion sensor door, the air shifted. It was the kind of store where regulars nodded at each other, where the workers gossiped behind the register, and where the unspoken rules were clearer than any policy posted on the wall. This man broke all of them just by existing. His jeans were torn at the knees and soaked around the ankles. His black hoodie was faded and zipped only halfway up over a plain white undershirt. His beard was unkempt. His shoes, canvas sneakers, were worn so thin the soles looked like they were peeling off. No one said anything, but their eyes did. And the cashier behind the counter? She didn't bother hiding her disdain. Her name was Melanie, mid-30s, platinum blonde ponytail, acrylic nails tapping on the register with the rhythm of someone who felt superior just by standing behind a counter. Her short-sleeved red uniform clung too tight around her shoulders, and her smirk stretched even tighter when the man approached with 3 items: a loaf of white bread, a small jar of peanut butter, and a bottle of water. Total, $6.18. He dug into his pocket and placed a crumpled dollar bill on the counter. Then another. Then a handful of coins, some of them sticky with residue or dirt. Melanie stared at the pile like it was roadkill. "Seriously?" she scoffed, loud enough for the 2 teenagers in aisle 4 to look over. "You're a few cents short, sir. Maybe you can put the water back and drink out of a hose or something." Her voice dripped with sarcasm. "Or maybe go beg outside. Might be faster." The man's eyes didn't flare with rage. He didn't yell, didn't explain. He just nodded silently, picked up the water, and placed it back on the shelf like he was used to this kind of thing. When he returned, Melanie scanned the bread and peanut butter, tossing them into a cheap plastic bag without care. "Next!" she barked, already ringing up the old man behind him. That should have been the end of it. But the next day, something happened that flipped the entire block upside down. By 10 a.m., a black Escalade with tinted windows pulled into the lot. A man stepped out in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit, crisp shirt, and dark brown Oxfords that hadn't touched dirt in years. His beard was trimmed sharp, his watch gleamed like it could pay someone's rent, and his eyes, dark and unreadable, swept the store from behind designer shades. It was the same man. No hoodie, no torn jeans, no shame, just presence and silence. Melanie didn't recognize him at first. Why would she? He wasn't playing the part she'd stuffed him into the day before. He approached the same register, this time empty-handed, and asked calmly, "Is the manager in?" Melanie, still snapping her gum and scrolling through her phone, didn't even glance up. "Why, you got another handful of pennies to dump on me?" she muttered. The silence that followed felt like the lights had dimmed. When she finally looked up, her jaw stiffened. "Wait, you're that guy from yesterday, aren't you?" she said, eyes narrowing. "You clean up real good." He didn't respond. Instead, a second man stepped inside, older, bald, clipboard in hand. Behind him, a woman in a sharp gray pantsuit entered with a phone pressed to her ear. Then a third man followed, tall, thin, and holding a set of keys. Melanie blinked, confused. "What the hell is going on?" she asked. The man she mocked leaned closer and said quietly, "As of this morning, this store is under new ownership. I just bought it." It took less than 10 seconds for Melanie's smirk to vanish. The employees murmured behind her. A stock boy froze mid-shelf. The assistant manager, a guy in khakis and a loose polo, came running out of the office. "Wait, what?" he asked, bewildered. "This some kind of joke?" But the woman in the gray pantsuit handed him a document. "Ownership transfer. We've been negotiating this for months. The papers were signed this morning." The man in the suit turned to her. "I'd like to do a walkthrough. Let's start in the back." Melanie stood there like someone had drained all the color from her skin. "You're joking," she whispered. "You're playing some sick prank. What is this, some viral TikTok thing?" But no one answered her. Not even the man she humiliated, who simply walked past her as if she were invisible. That, more than anything, shook her. Because suddenly, she wasn't the one in control. She wasn't even in the story anymore. What followed was even stranger. Over the next hour, customers were asked to leave as inventory was checked. The Escalade driver locked the doors. A locksmith began measuring frames. A city inspector came in through the back. At 12:10 p.m., the store went dark for 15 minutes. And when the lights came back on, so did the new signs. Under new ownership, grand reopening coming soon. Melanie tried to argue. "You can't just buy a store overnight. There's rules. I've worked here for 6 years. But the clipboard man cut her off. "You're not an employee anymore. You were let go effective this morning. All former employees are being reviewed. HR will be in touch." She stared at the paper he held out, her own name typed in block letters. No one was laughing. No one was cheering either. The store was quiet in a way that felt like the air was holding its breath. Word spread like wildfire down Southgate and 9th. By 3 p.m., 3 news vans were parked outside. Neighbors whispered theories. The man was a millionaire, a tech genius, a silent investor. Some claimed he was undercover, testing how the poor were treated. Others said he was part of a revenge scheme from a reality show crew, but none of them were right. Because the truth? It was far more unbelievable. Records showed no trace of his identity, no social media, no business filings in his name. His associates only spoke through intermediaries. The woman in the pantsuit told reporters, "Our client prefers anonymity." One local paper dubbed him the Phantom Owner. Another headline read, "From pennies to power, who is the man who bought Gerber's?" The man himself? He disappeared after that day. The store closed for a week. When it reopened, it was fully remodeled, prices were dropped, shelves were stocked with fresh produce, and every employee had changed. New uniforms, new faces, and above the register hung a small frame sign that read, "Dignity starts at the counter." Still, no one could answer the biggest question: who was he? Then days later, an anonymous tip was sent to a local podcaster, a voicemail recording with a disguised voice. The message was short. "If you want to know why I bought that store, look into the name Laura Maddox. Start with what happened to her in '96, and ask why no one talks about it anymore." Laura Maddox. The podcaster pulled the name and began digging, and what he found cracked open a sealed file buried for almost 30 years, one involving stolen inheritance, foster care corruption, and a boy who was reported missing at the age of 7. The name didn't match, but the face, the photo, the resemblance was undeniable. So if that broke man was really who they suspected, then where had he been all this time? And why did he choose that store, on that street, in that city, to make his return? What started as a strange, viral moment of justice, an unknown man buying the store where he'd been mocked, had evolved into something deeper, darker, and far more layered than anyone could have guessed. For most of the Southgate community, the story was already finished. A man humiliated one day comes back with power the next. But for the few who kept digging, like local podcaster Mia Trent, the name dropped in that anonymous voicemail, Laura Maddox, wasn't just a breadcrumb. It was a ticking time bomb buried beneath decades of secrets. Mia had been following the story since it exploded online. She'd recorded her initial podcast episode right after the takeover, titling it, "The Man Who Bought His Dignity Back." But when that voicemail came in, with the raspy, voice-masked tip and that one chilling line, "Look into Laura Maddox," everything shifted. She knew the name sounded familiar, and after a few hours combing through public records, she found her. Laura Maddox had been a child advocate, active through the early 90s, mostly working pro bono cases. A fierce voice for kids trapped in the foster care system, particularly black children who'd been bounced around, neglected, or discarded. But in 1996, something happened. A case she took on, the disappearance of a 7-year-old boy named Kamari, blew up. The boy had vanished from a group home outside of Easton, just 6 miles from where Gerber's Grocery now stood. The story made local news for about 2 weeks, then faded with no resolution and no closure. But Mia, after cross-referencing the boy's old photos with screenshots of the mysterious store buyer, froze. The eyes were the same, deep, unreadable, not angry, not sad, just quiet. Too quiet for someone who'd lived a normal life. She dug harder, finding a trail that felt intentionally buried. An abandoned group home. A closed-down non-profit that lost its license the same year Kamari vanished. A judge who'd mysteriously retired mid-term. And Maddox herself found dead in her apartment just months later. No foul play ruled, no further investigation. Suicide, they said. A sad ending to a tragic career. But what if she hadn't failed? What if she had saved that boy and hidden him? Mia reached out to a contact at City Records and used a press badge to request sealed juvenile files. Most were denied. But one clerk, a woman named Tanya, slipped her an internal memo late one night, writing only, "You didn't get this from me." Inside was a list of names tied to payouts from a child relocation program, one that had supposedly ended in 1995. But Kamari's name was on the list. Next to it, a 6-figure transfer from a private donor. The donor's ID was redacted, but the date matched exactly with the day Kamari was declared missing. Mia took a risk. She recorded a second podcast episode, this time titled Ghost Boy: The Lost Kamari Files, and released it with everything she had. Voice comparisons, document leaks, a theory. Kamari had been trafficked through the foster system, rescued in secret by Maddox, and given a new identity under a hidden donor program. The theory was wild, borderline conspiratorial, but the public devoured it. By morning, the story had gone national. Talk shows were speculating, hashtags were trending, Reddit threads exploded, and then things got dangerous. The following day, Mia's studio door was found pried open, her hard drives gone, her emails wiped, but the episode had already been uploaded, too late to take it back. And that's when she got her first call from the man himself. The voice was calm, almost weary. "You need to stop digging, Mia. Not for my sake, but yours." She recorded the call secretly, but didn't release it. Instead, she met him. They sat at a private booth in a small jazz lounge 3 towns over on a rainy Tuesday. He wore a black trench coat, leather gloves, and a gray scarf wrapped neatly at the collar. Not a disguise, just control. He didn't deny being Kamari. Didn't admit it either. But he said one thing that stuck with her. "I didn't come back for revenge. I came back because I was tired of hiding." Mia asked the question everyone wanted to know. Why that store? Why Gerber's? He looked at her with a faint, almost haunted smile. "Because that's where it started. That's where the man who sold me signed the paperwork." She stared at him, speechless. "Gerber." He nodded. "Different face, same name. Retired 10 years ago." but his brother still runs the property trust. I bought it through a shell company they never even realized was me. The pieces slammed into place like falling bricks. Gerber's Grocery hadn't just been a store, it was a front. A laundering front for foster home contracts back in the 90s. The man at the register the day Kamari vanished had been the older Gerber brother. He signed the release forms, pocketed the money, and passed the kid off like a crate of expired meat. And no one stopped him, except Laura Maddox. Kamari, now grown, wealthy, calculated, wasn't buying stores out of spite. He was unraveling a network, piece by piece. The grocery store was just the beginning. Back on Southgate, strange things began happening. City inspectors showed up at nearby buildings, all owned by the same trust. Leases were revoked, residents relocated, zoning permits retracted, and each time, a new company stepped in and quietly bought the land. Companies all tracing back to the same faceless conglomerate. The community thought it was gentrification, but it wasn't. It was reparation, silent, surgical, and deeply personal. Then Melanie reappeared. She went live on Facebook one night, shaky phone in hand, tears streaking her makeup. "Y'all think this guy's some kind of hero? He's not. He's playing you. He's dangerous. He came into my job, ruined my life, and now he's trying to buy the whole damn block." But no one listened. Instead, commenters flooded her live feed with the truth. Screenshots of her mocking customers. Clips from the store's security feed leaked anonymously. A private message she once sent to a coworker saying, "They should be grateful we even let them in here." The tide had turned, sympathy gone. The internet moved on. But Kamari, or whoever he was now, didn't. Because the final piece of the puzzle hadn't dropped yet. A sealed safe was found beneath the floor of Gerber's during the remodel. Inside, files. Original documentation from the foster programs, names, signatures, dollar amounts, payment trails. One of the folders was marked Program C, Children for Transit. Another had handwritten notes from Laura herself with red ink scrawls like, "They're not placing them, they're selling them," and "Kamari is the key." He took those files straight to the press. A week later, a grand jury opened an investigation into the Gerber Property Trust, 3 former state officials, and the director of child welfare in 1996. The story broke across every major news network. A class action lawsuit was filed by survivors. Kamari didn't speak publicly. He didn't need to. The files spoke loud enough. The grocery store stayed open, but it wasn't about food anymore. It became a hub, a center for the displaced, free lunches on Sundays, a lawyer on site twice a week, shelves filled with books and pamphlets about tenants' rights, education access, and foster care reform. No one asked who funded it. They knew. Then, one final twist. At the edge of the city, an old building sat abandoned. The former group home where Kamari had last been seen. A crew arrived in black vans and boarded it up. The next morning, it was leveled. And in its place, a foundation was laid for a new structure. A single sign hung on the fence around it, the Laura Maddox Center for Justice. Opening soon. That's when Mia released the 3rd and final podcast episode. It was titled The Boy Who Bought His Voice. She included everything, the theories, the truths, the lies that had once kept a child buried beneath decades of silence. And in her closing words, she said, "You can't always see justice when it happens. Sometimes it moves in shadows through pain, through money, through power. But sometimes, justice walks back into the store where it was sold and buys it back, piece by piece." As for Kamari, he was last seen stepping into a black car outside the new center, his suit crisp, his face calm. A reporter tried to stop him, asking, "What do you say to the people who think you went too far?" He paused, then finally spoke, just once. "I didn't go far enough." Door shut. The car drove off, and the city would never be the same.